We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the Mac Sports Connection podcast, where Alex hosts all things Mac, all things football, all things sports, right here, Mac Sports Connection, baby. The Mid-American Conference best, bringing it only the great Mac to everyone.
Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Mac Sports Connection podcast, part of the Varsity Podcast Network, presented by Lairfield. I'm your host, Alex. Joining me, as always, your other host, Graham Giles. Graham, welcome back.
Oh, it's exciting to be here and finally, kind of settling into that groove. And speaking of groove, how do you not groove to that intro there? Devin did such a good job with that.
Dude, Devin Potter, Devin McCoy, Devin Vox is what his official handle is, and I got to tell you. When I said, Devin, this is what I want, he far exceeded my expectations for that intro. So mad props to him. And he's done great work for us, since doing that intro. He's done the music for us for our baseball broadcast, some of the music for our basketball broadcast. I mean, he's just done an excellent job. You guys, I've tweeted about him before. I'll send out more information again. Check out Devin Vox, always doing some incredible work, both for us, but for himself as well. And I really appreciate the work he did. It's probably the best intro in the history of podcast. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you brought out the Trump hands as soon as you said the best intro of all time. Don't do the impression, please. Don't do the impression. The other thing,
I won't.
The other thing I was looking at was I've been trying to think of what our Mac Sports Connection logo reminds me of for the longest time, and you know what it is? It's a 3D Dorito. That's what it is. Remember 3D Doritos?
I do remember 3D Doritos, and now I'm not going to unsee that.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a 3D Dorito, which my favorite of the Doritos because it adds a whole extra dimension of flavor. That's Frito-Lay. Look me up if you want to pay for that sponsorship.
I'll start tagging them on Twitter this week. But anyway, guys, welcome back. We have officially wrapped up bowl season. Mac football is done. Fall sports are officially done, and we're well underway for basketball season, for wrestling, swim and dive, gymnastics. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on basketball. And Graham, I got to tell you, I know we're only 4 games into the conference slate, but teams are starting to shake out to where it looked like they might shake out, with a couple notable exceptions.
Well, it's funny that's kind of how I feel about MAC basketball and college basketball in general. But it is this time of year when teams really start to coalesce, and we start to see the conference play starts up, and these teams either come together or they don't. There's still plenty of time left in the season. We're 4 games into conference play, and plenty of time left for these teams to either prove something or not otherwise. But yeah, I mean, so far so good for these Miami Redhawks.
Man, I got to tell you, I've been impressed with them, and I've looked at what they've done on their schedule. Everybody wants to talk about, look at the teams they've played. Sure, they've not played powerhouses for their wins, but guess what? At the end of the day, all that matters are getting the wins, right? They're sitting here at what 11-4, sitting at a perfect 3-0 in MAC play, and they've done it as a team. It's not been. I mean, they've got a couple dominant players, but they've done it as a team. Cam Kraft, of course, leading them in points per game at 17 points per game. Peter Suter, he's averaging 3.5 assists. And this is a team effort. They sit 29th in the country in points per game at 83.5, which is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, and that's and like you said, it has a lot to do with Cam Kraft getting in there and scoring buckets, putting up 17 points per game. I think what's interesting is preseason, with the coaches had Miami ranked 6th in the conference in that preseason poll. And so far, they are the class of the conference there. But the other interesting side of it is the Ohio Bobcats were supposed to be the number one team in the conference, and they are living up to those expectations, if not quite in that number one position yet. They certainly have played like it. In most statistical categories, we see an Ohio Bobcat leading the way, starring AJ Clayton, who is leading the conference in points there. And really, the Ohio Bobcats are excellent when it comes to offense in the MAC.
Well, just up and down the court, you've got Cam Kraft, of course, from Miami, AJ Clayton from Ohio. These are going to be guys that you mentioned not being picked early. Ohio being picked early, Miami not being picked early. These guys might be the ones who we see contend for Player of the Year in the Mid-American Conference. We've seen it come out of Toledo, Akron, and Kent State. You don't really see it come out of Miami, Ohio. I mean, you see it a little bit out of Ohio. They've always had great players. Preston, a couple years ago from the Bobcats. Just to see it from Miami, we haven't seen a dominant player from Miami really since 1999.
Yeah, it's been quite a while, and I would be happy if we're sitting at the MAC tournament in a couple of months and talking about how great Cam Kraft has been so far this year, and really we're talking about him as the Player of the Year in the conference. I think it's interesting that some of these players, AJ Clayton was picked as part of this MAC preseason first team All MAC. Miami doesn't make an appearance in either the first or second team in that preseason poll, and so I think we're all a little surprised to see Miami doing so well. Every year it feels like we're talking about the Ohio Bobcats, and we're talking about the Akron Zips, and we're talking about the Kent State Golden Flashes, and we're talking about the Toledo Rockets, and those are our top four every year. And somehow Miami has snuck into the conversation this year. I think that's great for the MAC. This is a much maligned basketball conference, at least on the men's side. And this is something where if we get a little bit more of that parity, and we get a little bit more of these teams who are succeeding, especially outside of the conference, it can only be good for the MAC.
No, I definitely, I'm right there with you. So hats off to the Miami Redhawks. We don't want to celebrate too early. Again, plenty of conference games to go, but you're sitting at the top of the conference and you're looking like the class of the league. Toledo, Ohio, Akron, of course, also all 3-0. So it's a 4-way tie at the top. Then you got Ball State and Kent State sitting at 2-1 in conference play, just one game behind. Kent State sitting at 11-4. They've had some interesting struggles this year, but yeah, I think they're starting to right the ship. They did drop an interesting game to the aforementioned Ball State Cardinals, but they're starting to turn things around, get things figured out. They got Western Michigan coming up this week, but bottom of the conference is kind of looking like what I expected. Central, Buffalo, Northern Illinois, Western. Not surprised to see them all down there. Buffalo has been really struggling since the Nate Oates era.
Yeah, and that's preseason. That's what we expected. We expected to see Western, Northern Illinois, Buffalo, Eastern Michigan be our lowest ranking teams. Eastern Michigan, another team who's kind of overachieving expectations without actually overachieving yet. They are still under 500, but that they're 1-2 in the conference, which puts them right in the middle of the conference standings right now, reminding us how early it is in conference play.
Exactly. Over on the women's side, we've got the Ball State Cardinals, the lone undefeated, sitting at a perfect 4-0. They also sit with the best record in the conference, 12-4, and have looked incredible really all season long. They're on a 6-game winning streak right now. And you knew Ball State was going to be good this year, right? You know, Ball State has been really good the last several years. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention their superstar athlete, Allie Becky, who has just been so dominant for him this year. If I have one game on my calendar circled, Graham, I got to tell you, it's that Toledo Ball State game that's probably going to happen in the February here. The one we got, a week and a half from now? That's at Ball State. I'm really excited about the one later in the year that's going to determine a lot more with the conference championship race.
Yeah, I mean, it's at this point, it looks like Ball State and Toledo are again in that race for the top of the conference. That over the past few years we've kind of come to expect from those two teams. I think folks really thought Toledo was going to take a step back with the coaching change this year, and the difference has been not much. This is a Toledo team 3-1 in the conference, 11-3 overall, and sitting at second place and looking pretty good this year. I would not be surprised to see this Toledo women's team back in the top of the conference and fighting for that MAC title.
You know who's been really surprising this year, up until conference play kicked off? I've been very impressed with Becky Burke and the Buffalo Bulls. Say that 3 times fast.
I won't. I can't.
I mean, they started off the season, looks like 12-0, and then started off conference play 1-0, got the win over Central Michigan, ended up losing to Kent State at Kent State, got the win against Bowling Green, and then they lost to that same Ball State team. Buffalo, I know they're sitting in the middle of conference standings right now, but again, it's early. I'm excited to see what Becky Burke does. This is her 3rd year there. She's done nothing but continue to grow this program. And a big part of it is 5th-year senior Chella Watson. She's leading the conference in points per game. I mean, she has been an absolute nightmare for defenses. She's got almost 20 points a contest.
Yeah, and don't forget Kirsten Lewis-Williams, who also in the top 15 in terms of points per game, but supporting that Buffalo team. What's funny is looking through the stats right now. These Buffalo starters appear in almost every statistical category. I think when you talk about teams, maybe the most well-rounded team in the conference is these Buffalo Bulls.
And I think that's going to play really well, especially come conference tournament time. We saw it happen last year where the same Buffalo team or near same Buffalo team upset perennial favorite Toledo in the conference tournament, ultimately would lose, and Kent State would win that tournament. But it was incredible to see this Buffalo team and what Becky Burke's been able to do. Year 3, this is the time to really turn it up, and I'm really excited to see them wrap up the season. Eastern Michigan, again, they've gone through a big coaching change. They're 1-13 right now, dead last in the conference, 0-4. But right down there with them is Northern Illinois, Central Michigan, and Bowling Green. All of them sitting at 1-3 or 0-4. Oh, and then the Ohio Bobcats, of course. So the bottom half of the conference right now really struggling to get it figured out. Some close losses for each of these teams in conference play. Again, we've said it. We're not going to say it too much more. It's early. It
is very early, and I wouldn't be surprised if things start to shake out the way we expect them to. This Ball State team, I think, is going to continue to do well. But we watched the Kent State Golden Flashes last year win the whole thing, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we see Kent State start climbing up as well. And then they're in spitting distance right now. They're 1 game out of first place. So plenty of basketball left to be played. And it should be exciting. I love the women's basketball in this conference. It's always exciting. There's always tough teams. And It's kind of thing where when we go to that conference tournament each year and we get to watch these teams that we might not get to see as often throughout the season, it always shows the class of the conference there and just how good women's basketball is in the MAC. Another check mark for maybe this league deserves another bid into that tournament.
I'm just saying, I've been preaching that for years, as have many of the fans in this league, as did Trisha Cullop. The last time that Toledo was in the NCAA tournament just 2 years ago, she talked about how, it was important that we played the Penn States, the Michigans of the world, but it was the league that helped prepare them to get a first round victory in the NCAA tournament. So the MAC deserves it on the women's side, I think. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. We've got MAC Sunbelt Challenge coming up here soon, Saturday, February 8th. It looks like the Sunbelt men are traveling to all the MAC schools. The Sunbelt women the Sunbelt women hosting the MAC schools. And some pretty good matchups here. We won't go over all of them, but it's interesting to note the Sunbelt won the belt the first year of this challenge. This challenge now has been extended through 2027. The Sun Belt won the belt in the first year for both the men and women. And then the men picked up 8 wins to start off the second year of the challenge. However, the MAC has an 8-4 advantage on the women. So it'll be interesting to see. There's an opportunity for the MAC to come away victorious. And since the start of this, this whole tournament, this format, if you will, this belt challenge, the MAC, they're right there. I mean, these have all been great games. I think this has been a huge boost for the Mid-American Conference, and I'm really excited to see what happens. The Sun Belt has done a great job. They've been great hosts. The MAC, I've heard nothing but great things about how the MAC's hosted them. So a lot of good things happening with that, and I'm really excited to see this challenge continue and hopefully longer than just 2026, 2027.
Yeah, and I love to see these kind of intra-conference matchups that happen in the middle of the season. So often these out-of-conference matchups are just kind of thrown together by athletic departments, and they don't have any sort of rhyme or reason about them other than this is who we could schedule. But this is a great way for both of these conferences, for the MAC and the Sun Belt, to make sure that these out-of-conference matchups are not only regular, happening year after year, and happening in a way that makes it so we can kind of place each team into that hierarchy that we try and do before that big March tournament every year. But also in a way that creates rivalries. And I think that's fun. I think it's fun when we see conferences match up regularly enough that you can have an out-of-conference rival.
Well, and it's always nice when you can't be at the games, especially when you're at the Sun Belt. You can listen to the games. And in fact, you can listen to those games on the Varsity Podcast app, available in the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, by Learfield. It's for free. You can listen to all your favorite calls from all your favorite schools, not just Mid-American Conference, but every conference across the Division I landscape. Voices from the MAC, the Big Ten, the Sun Belt. You can sign in. You can save your favorite schools, your sports, and all the content for super easy access. Everything on demand or live, which is pretty special. You'll also find hundreds of great podcasts through the Varsity Podcast Network, including your fan favorites, such as ours truly, the Max Sports Connection podcast, the Group of Five Guys podcast, the Sickos Committee podcast, and many more. So make sure you guys download the Varsity app today for free. Start listening to the calls and podcasts that bring your favorite teams and conferences to life. We have some interesting developments in college athletics coming up, potentially coming up, I should say. But I think it's something that it's worth keeping an eye on, especially as fans of a Group of Five conference and Group of Five schools. There's a couple proposals going on. One where the Power Four conferences are essentially proposing to reshape governance and championships, giving themselves the authority to determine who makes championships, policies, the postseason events such as basketball, football, etc. Basically, this proposal is suggesting a new NCAA subdivision that would allow power leagues to control all of these tournament formats, revenue distribution, and the selection process. It's just a working document, but Graham, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, before we get to that, this news just dropped, so kind of breaking news here. But you hear this is going back to men's basketball. AJ Clayton from Ohio, who we just talked about, named Lou Henson National Player of the Week. So that news just dropped as we're recording this. But he scored his 1,000th career point at Ohio this week, and this past week he averaged 29 points per game.
Wow,
which leading to this National Player of the Week from the Lou Henson organization. So that's props to AJ Clayton for that honor. Also tabbed as the MAC Player of the Week, which is an honor, but maybe not quite as big as this National Player of the Week is.
That's once you win National Player of the Week, conference honors just kind of feel like okay, well, that should have happened. But yeah, congrats to him. That's incredible. And yeah, breaking news on this show. You don't get that very often.
No, it's the you happen to be on the old MAC basketball page on the Get Some Maction website, which I recommend all MAC fans checking out the GetSomeMaction.com. But when that story dropped, and great for Clayton, great for the Ohio Bobcats, and great for MAC basketball. When it comes to the MAC, I think sometimes we get overshadowed on a national stage by these larger conferences, and this new proposal is going to give the larger conferences an opportunity to do that more often. I don't know. I think the only lens through which you can view this proposal is financial. As much as we want to talk about the political ramifications of power conferences having control of these postseason tournaments, it's the financial side of it that is really the only way that makes sense. Because if we talk about this from a sort of a sports position, from the gamesmanship and just general sports.
Sure.
I think when we look at it from that, it doesn't make sense to put any one conference in charge of it. Like, there's a reason that the NCAA exists, and so even a conglomerate of the so-called Power Four conferences doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of just pure competition. But when we look at it from a financial perspective, there's an argument that these power conferences make the most money. And there's an argument that matchups between them make the most money. I think what's most interesting about this proposal, and the fact that the NCAA has talked about as well, is when it comes to March Madness, especially like that tournament, which arguably the class of postseason play when in collegiate athletics, that March Madness tournament on both the men's and women's side is so exciting. Mm-hmm. And the part of it that we all love, the part of it why we're all crumpling up our office brackets in day 2 of that tournament, at least for me, is because we have these Cinderella stories every year. We have the opportunity for these teams who get overlooked, these teams from small conferences, make it to the tournament and have an opportunity to go as far as they possibly can. And you talk about that Ohio Bobcats team making the Sweet 16 a few years back. This is an opportunity for small teams to make a showing on the national stage. And if we start to limit smaller conferences access to that tournament, we lose some of the soul that is really the class of postseason collegiate athletics.
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point, limiting that access. Of course, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey is giving us lip service. And I'm no disrespect to Greg Sankey or any Power 4 commissioner. You guys do incredibly impossible jobs. But it's nothing but lip service. He's literally saying it's a necessary evolution, but it's not going to reduce access for the smaller conferences to the tournaments like March Madness, which like you mentioned is noted for its chaos, for its underdog stories. But I feel like that's very much the opposite is true. And in fact, I could almost see the smaller conference getting a little bit more access to that in exchange for less access to the college football playoffs. I could see them trying to do this trade-off. Well, your Northern Illinois Huskies or your Ohio Bobcats won't compete with Ohio State here, but hey, we'll give the MAC an extra bid in basketball. I could really see that happening. And again, this is all just a proposal. And it is worth noting that a full Division I membership vote would be required. And if you can't gain consensus, it could lead to really a split between these power conferences. And I think the NCAA, because it sounds like the power conferences are pretty much on board. Who wouldn't be? You give yourselves more power. This could ultimately result in that big split we've talked about, where we talked about the Big Ten and the SEC splitting off. Now it just may be the Power Four doing their own thing.
Yeah, and certainly the timing of this proposal makes it clear that this is about football. Mm-hmm. That's what this is about. This is the power conferences being upset that they weren't represented well enough in the college football playoff, which is interesting because who are you going to leave out, right? Obviously, the answer there is they would rather Boise State have not made the playoff, and it's silly. It's silly to suggest that a Boise State team didn't deserve to be in it. Because certainly nobody's arguing that a Notre Dame team who is playing in the national championship doesn't deserve to be there based on their play on the field, and nobody's arguing that they don't have the kind of market base that they can't draw crowds and draw viewership. Notre Dame, one of the top teams in the country in terms of brand power. So nobody's making that argument about Notre Dame. That's not the team that the power conferences are upset made this playoff. It's Boise State. And you like them or not, I tend to like the Boise State Broncos. But like them or not, they had a season that showed they deserved to be there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anybody else watched that game in the playoff, but I thought that game proved they deserve to be there. They started slow, but by the end of it, I don't think anybody walking away who actually watched the game thought that Boise State was completely outmatched. So I understand from a financial perspective, the power conferences wanting a team in there, a team with bigger brand power, a team who can draw a little more eyeballs to the game, and make the game maybe more financially successful. That being said, it's hard to see from a competitive standpoint what argument the Power 5 conferences are making. Power 4, sorry, the Power 4 conferences are making, because truly, these seem like the 12 most deserving teams who made the playoff this year.
No, absolutely.
And I can't, maybe your argument would be, we would like to see a format where just the top 12 teams, regardless of conference championship status, make it. Although that seems to be a pathway where you could open up spots for group of 5 teams. But maybe your argument is that more teams, more Power 5 conferences get guaranteed spots. It's hard to understand what the proposal could possibly be that would allow the Power 4 to get more teams into the playoff. But other than just not guaranteeing that last spot to a group of 5 champion, that's all I can see. Maybe the idea is they would like the control because they were upset with the seeding. And how that worked, and the conference champions getting precedence in seeding over teams who maybe were technically ranked higher,
which I think is insane because you look at that. Ohio State, who will be playing for the national championship next Monday, was finished, you could argue, 3rd or 4th in the Big Ten, just kind of depending on where you want to rank them. I think technically 3rd. Given that they did beat Indiana head to head, And so I think you could argue. Well, no, I think it technically ended up fourth. I don't have the Big Ten standings in front of me, but but it was Penn State and Oregon in the Big Ten championship. My argument, if you're Ohio State, and if this was the 4-team playoff, you wouldn't have been in at all. Like you would have been on the outside looking in. If you're Tennessee, you're on the outside looking in. If you're Notre Dame, that Northern Illinois game probably hurt you a little bit. There's no question Notre Dame was one of the best teams in the country late in the season. That Northern Illinois game hurt your resume for a 4-team playoff. So this expanded playoff, I think, was beneficial to those schools, to those teams who wouldn't have made it in the 4-team. So I do find it really interesting that there's such an upheaval and uproar from these college commissioners from the Power Four who are like, we weren't represented enough. Specifically the SEC. We all know the SEC argument. The SEC's got one team into the Final Four, and they were a former Big 12 team. They were year one into the SEC. So to say you weren't represented, okay, maybe not. But when you were represented, what'd you do with it? You didn't do anything.
Well, truly. And that's, I mean, I think I have a different teams who would make the 4-team playoff to me. I think the committee would have put Notre Dame in. I think if we're looking at a 4-team playoff this year, it would have been Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Notre Dame.
Probably.
And I think fans rightly would have been in an uproar about it. They would have been very upset that the SEC got 2 teams in with multiple losses. But I think that is how it would have shaken out. But that being said, it is hard for me to understand what the Power Four hopes to accomplish with taking control of these postseason games, because it's obviously the answer is they would like more of their teams in, but I just don't see room for more of their teams other than maybe one more of their team could have fit in. It seems silly to suggest.
Well, Alabama certainly proved they didn't belong.
But I mean, well, the fact of the matter is that that bowl game was two. Well, it meant nothing, but it was 2 power conference teams. So, by this proposal, I don't think they care which team makes it. If you not that Michigan ever had a chance to make it this year, but they don't really care as long as it's somebody from their conglomerate that makes it in
from their 64 teams.
That's right. As far as how this affects other postseason play, though, is interesting, because you're right. Maybe you do make allowances to allow more, more smaller conference teams into the basketball tournament. But again, I don't see much room for the power conferences improving their position in the football. And so I have to imagine that they're looking to improve their position in other sports as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's been said many times, but football is about the only profitable sport when it comes to collegiate athletics. And so that's the one that these power conferences care about. In these other ones, it doesn't so much matter if you have the power or not, because those sports are losing your university money anyway. So it doesn't matter that much if you don't get more teams in the postseason, because you're not going to make that much money off of it. But the football is that's the opportunity for you to make back some of your athletics budget, and certainly having control over the playoff would make a difference. And if you, which I think the fans are clamoring for, if you expand the playoff again, 16 teams or even larger, I do think that a Power Four control over that playoff certainly could benefit those conferences, financially speaking.
Well, and I think, this also proved that for Notre Dame, that not joining a conference was the best thing they could do. They got $14 million from that first round that they don't have to share with anybody. Right.
Well, yeah, they could have they at this point, I think they've made $20 million just on the college football playoff. And so yeah, not bad. Not bad. They have to share it with their conference, who is just them. That's not a bad day. And so much hay has been made of Ohio State's $20 million roster this year.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame has just paid for a potential $20 million roster of their own just in their 3 games. So this is who knows? Maybe an argument for Notre Dame not joining a conference. That's another issue. There is maybe we can do the Power Four being in control of this new postseason can force Notre Dame into a conference and force them to share some of those funds. It's been attempted before.
Yeah,
we've tried to get Notre Dame in a conference before and it hasn't worked. So let's not forget that Notre Dame still has a little bit of negotiating power as one of the premier brands in collegiate athletics.
What is it? God, country, and Notre Dame.
That's what you say, I suppose.
I think that's what the university says. Yeah, I just pulled it up. It's a phrase that appears above the east door of the Sacred Heart at the University of Notre Dame. God, country, Notre Dame.
Well, you are the noted Catholic, so I suppose you would know.
Don't put that evil on me. Protestant all the way, baby.
Yeah. What are you protesting?
You right now. I do think it is important to know too with this potential proposal. The NCAA does have an existing agreement with the power leagues through 2035 in terms of kind of governance and things like that. So it just sounds like the power leagues don't want to wait that long, which, I mean, that's another 10 years. That's so I get that. But to kind of go off of the making the money aspect too, there's even talk of expanding the NCAA tournament up to 4, maybe even up to 8 extra teams, which would give, again, the power conferences more access. But they've also destroyed the NIT, right? We saw that non-power conference champions. So like Toledo won the regular season in basketball. Those who don't make the NCAA tournament would automatically get a bid to the NIT. Last year, that was no longer the case. And so we're not seeing the benefit for the smaller conferences there either. I mean, it's a lot of push out effort, but to that point, the NIT was the least watched it's been in something, I think it was like 18 years, due to that, right? Now you got, nobody wants to watch a 15-17 North Carolina play, a 14-16 Michigan State in the WNI or in the NIT, which probably not a great argument because that's an old rivalry, but it's there. Nobody wants to watch lower quality power conferences. They want to watch their regular season champions try to compete for a secondary championship.
Well, that's a strong argument. I don't have the data to back it up, but I tend to agree with you. I think that is the draw to the NIT is when we have smaller teams from smaller conferences who have the opportunity to go to a postseason tournament and prove themselves against competition at large. The fans of those conferences and the fans of those teams want to tune in and watch that. And I don't have the numbers, but my guess would be when we see more of that kind of those smaller teams having the opportunity to make a push, that's when the NIT gets its largest viewership. Just because when it comes to larger conferences, if you're in your example, if you have a Michigan State team who isn't performing well, Michigan State fans are used to Final Four runs and they're used to really strong Michigan State teams. When those teams don't make it that far, the Fairweather fans fall off that bandwagon awful quick, and they're not going to watch their team in the NIT. If that Michigan State team sneaks into the NCAA tournament through the Big Ten championship, then certainly all of those fans are tuning in and rooting on the Spartans. But In the NIT, those fans aren't as interested. So I think that's a strong argument. One of the proposals we've seen when it comes to college football is creating another subdivision where the group of 5 champions would have an opportunity to play in their own playoff. And when we talk about that, it's often compared to the NIT. And we see now that as we start pushing out the smaller teams from the NIT, well, that tournament becomes less interesting. When we have a lot of mid-tier teams playing in that tournament, it really cements its status as a second-tier tournament. When we have conference champions playing in that tournament, and the reason they're there is because their league only gets 1 bid or 2 bids, that's when that tournament becomes exciting. That's when you start to question, hey, could the champion of this NIT tournament have done something in the NCAA tournament? And that kind of intrigue, I think, brings a lot more eyeballs.
So I just pulled up some stuff on the NCAA selection for the NIT. So I want to apologize. I was actually wrong on some numbers. I thought for sure I'd read somewhere that the viewership had gone down. Viewership was actually up for this last year's NIT. It looks like this was the best NIT championship between Seton Hall and Indiana State since Dayton beat North Carolina in 2010. That was 1.84 million viewers. This last year is 1.4 in the championship. And apparently this is the first NIT final to top 1 million viewers since TCU Georgia in 2017, and the best NIT game in any round since 2013. So clearly the viewers know something I don't, or the networks know something I don't, and it worked out for them. I tend to believe that the opposite over time will come true, but whatever. I did look that the NIT is going to do a different sort of selection this year. All teams receiving an exempt bid are guaranteed the opportunity to host a first-round game. I'm not sure what goes into the exempt bids. The top 2 teams not selected in the NCAA Men's Basketball Championship from the ACC and the SEC. And then, in addition, the top team not selected to the NCAA Championship from the top 12 conferences based on Ken Pom ratings were receiving an exempt bid to the NIT. Then, in addition to the exempt teams, regular season conference champions that are not selected can earn an automatic bid to the NIT as long as that season champion had an average of 125 or better across the BPI, KPI, NET, KenPom, SOR, Torvik, and WAB rankings.
So it goes a long way to say
a lot of hoops
that we have. We have a bar that's set that says teams have to meet a certain criteria of goodness before they can actually get those automatic bids. In my experience watching the NIT, we've seen, you and I both Toledo alum. We've seen the Rockets make their fair share of appearances in those NIT and WNIT tournaments, and it's always fun to watch. It's always a tournament that I enjoy watching, and I think those numbers match up with a larger appetite for sports when it comes to viewership nowadays. And I think there's a lot of people who put that on gambling, on the ubiquity of sports betting, and maybe so. Maybe that access to sports betting has allowed people to be interested in more sports and more tournaments. But I got to say, at least from a podcaster's perspective, more eyeballs on more sports is good for us.
Worked for me. Well, guys, I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We certainly appreciate it. Be sure to check out all the socials. We're posting more content, trying to do some more questions, getting your guys' opinions on things. Question I posted today was your top moments for your MAC school. Some of the best moments your school's had in their history. Let us know. I posted that on Twitter X, so make sure you guys are checking that out. A couple days ago, we talked about the non-rivals, teams that essentially you consider a rival that aren't true rivals. A lot of bad blood between Northern Illinois and Toledo for a non-rivalry. Seems like Toledo, I'm noticing in the comments here, a lot of people just don't like Toledo. Then looking at you, Eastern Michigan fans, but it just seems like there's a lot of hate for the Rockets, and I don't know if that's targeting me specifically or whatnot. I'm sure that people don't like the Rockets any better because of me, but it is what it is. But no, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Again, check out all the socials. The handle is at the MSC Podcast on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, over on YouTube at MSC Podcast. This episode, you guys will be getting this episode on Wednesday, trying to release those on a regular schedule for you. But yeah, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, let us know. Shoot us a tweet, shoot us a message on Instagram, TikTok, wherever. Just let us know. Say, hey, we'd love to hear more about this, or hey, we'd love to never hear about this again. Let us know. We'll be happy to attempt to accommodate you as best we can. Graham, do you have anything else before we sign off?
Yeah, if you've listened this far, let us know what your favorite postseason setup would be for either the basketball tournament or the football playoff. I'd love to hear your postseason proposals. Let's say that you're a power conference and you get to decide now what happens in the postseason. That's all I got. I mean, that's we're excited about really conference play starting for MAC basketball, and excited to get some more basketball coverage going. And as February creeps ever closer, I'm getting excited about college baseball starting up again too. So can't wait to do some coverage of that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.